Hello, Tommy. I kept my promise. I'm here. I kept my promise. I'm here. I'm trying to help you while you're here. Trying to help. If you'd like to say anything, the room is yours. The room is yours.
You are now watching Turn to Gold on BB3 TV with your host, the Ghost Boy, Chris Cesare.
Hey everybody, Chris Cesare here. Welcome to Turn to Gold. September, the leaves will be turning very soon. I always like when the seasons change. It's a new beginning for us to reset and look forward to the holiday seasons. This past weekend, I was at Summer Mansion, and there was an event in honor of Mr. Bill Freeman, who passed away earlier this year from cancer. And if you didn't know Bill, he was a larger-than-life figure who really spoke his truth to folks. It was refreshing to hear someone just, call it as they saw it. And he did a lot of work for Summer Mansion in restoring it and maintaining it, and for a lot of people together in that effort, which he spent a lot of hours with. I got a chance to meet some of his family, his daughters, sons, his grandchildren, and I was very honored. I had the chance to say a few words about Bill in that location that he so loved. It's tough, it's tough when we lose someone that we care about. Most of us do have a sense of faith or believing that there is something more, that our corporal being doesn't define us, that our spirit, our soul is what defines us, and what lasts beyond and inspires others. And still, even with the knowledge that there is more and that there are great things beyond, there's still an element of loss. You just can't replace that physical hug or the sound of someone's voice, or conversations that were had. And so sometimes it's a challenge for us to move forward. One of the things that I think about in regards to loss is the person that we lost. So I'm one who grieves. I have separation anxiety. I don't like to lose things. I don't like for vacations to end. I don't like people to go away from visiting my house. I don't like leaving events. But one of the things I thought about over the years was that the person that we are grieving, if they are still there, if they're listening and watching, they would say, stop. I love you. Live your life. Don't stop because I stopped. Remember me and what I did. Try to apply some of the things I taught you, and I led by example, but please don't stop, because that just helps nobody. And so I think it's important that we carry within ourselves a piece of the people that we lose physically. And this way, two things happen. Number one, we honor them and live on forever. And number two, we allow ourselves to keep fighting the good fight and doing good things. And so I was very honored to be able to say a few words on behalf of Bill Freeman. And hello, Patricia. It's nice to see you. Thank you. I really thank you for being here every single week. Thank you for your son, gift to the planet here. And he's one of the main reasons, him and Tom and Taryn, that I'm here in the first place. I'm going to thank you for all you've done in that project. Hi, Barry. It's good to see you as always. A good friend of mine, Barry. Nice to see you, and I'll be seeing you again, I'm sure. Nancy, I met Nancy and John in New Jersey at the Power Unity Fest, and then I saw them again at Gettysburg. Really very nice, talented, kind people. As I say, salt of the earth. I love them very much, and I'm very proud to know both of them. If you saw me at Gettysburg, you saw Vincois was there with me. Over the years, I've traveled with Michael Lewis. I've traveled with Phil Casey, a lot of folks. And I always have one person with me. I take places that's good people. They'll help drive for me and make sure I eat properly and things. He's just a great guy, and I'm very proud to know him. And Tom, yes, Tom. Thank you so much for being there, Tom. Exactly right. I liked seeing you, and I'm proud you were there with your cousin Dee, and we did the right thing by doing that and honoring people. And Brooke Harmai was my guest on last week's show, and she was the talented individual who put together the event, the honor to Bill Freeman. So Brooke, thank you for all of your work. I mentioned last week what a wonderful person you are, how inspiring you are, and once again you proved just that, how inspiring, what a kind, decent person you are, and I'm very proud to know you. And thank you for all the hard work that you did. And it was a great event. The event itself didn't draw 10,000 people. And that's, in a way, good, because that wasn't what Bill was about. Bill liked having friends he could trust, friends he could rely upon. He liked family, blood family, related family, friend family, work family. He just liked having people around that were decent. And I'm sure he loved having a small group of people that loved him, gathered around for the right reason. And it was amazing to see the folks there. And I remember, as I was talking about Bill, true words, people were tearing up. And that wasn't my words. That was Bill. The words I used wasn't a kind of creativity on my part. It was just saying the truth of who Bill was. And Bill's memory really, I think, really meant a lot to so many people. And I really do. I hope that we can carry on some of the things that he stood for. He was a hard worker. He was a hard worker. His kids even told me he spent so many hours at Cinelli Mansion. It was almost like another child that he had. And it's nice to believe in something. It's nice to do something that's lasting. We can play video games all we want and level 15, level 26, but what is that? But helping out people in need, helping people to get their flat tire, lending an ear of somebody who's having a hard time. These are things that tend to make actual contributions to society in a very good way. And as you know, each week I try to spotlight people who are inspirational, people who I admire. Sometimes I know them well, sometimes I don't know them well, but I like the opportunity to speak with them, and hopefully you get the chance to learn, as I do, about who they are, where they came from, what inspires them, and what they can share with us. And I'm very pleased. My two guests tonight, I had a chance to speak with at the event honoring Bill Freeman at Cinelli Mansion. And I knew both of them for many years, although it wasn't as though we spoke on a regular basis. If you go to a lot of these conventions, you realize that a lot of times you're at your table and you're speaking with people, you're conversing, and it's a time-consuming, energy-consuming thing. And then you go off and you speak for an hour, and then you come back and you say hello back and forth. But I did have a chance to interact with them for a time about 8 years ago. I had been invited to Salem Con, and I think it was the Hawthorne Hotel. And at that time, I was just coming off of my sci-fi TV show. I had an agent back then, and the agent had said to me, "Listen, at these VIP parties, people are going to buy you drinks." Well, I don't drink, but here's the thing: they're paying to see you and to socialize. So if they offer you a drink, have the drink. If I don't drink, well, you understand something. I mean, if you turn the drink down, it's like you're being rude to them. It's like shaking their hand. So fine, it had to be drinks. So apparently, one screwdriver, which is vodka and orange juice, became 2. Well, that's okay, right? And then that became 3. And then I think around 6 or 7, I'm not a math student, I guess I was so happy that I became like a whirling dervish. I don't know if that's the term. All these things are revealed to me after the fact by people who may be pulling my leg or telling the truth. I don't know, because I remember laughing a lot and being carried out, basically. And I remember I knocked over a bookshelf and things like that. Well, I at some point in time, I realized I was being helped by people, fluids in me and things like that. And are you okay? And stabilizing me. And I remember, I who's that? And that was Dr. Spector. That was Frank Cinelli, and he was so kind to me. And of course, I was a little embarrassed afterwards. I don't know what I was saying or doing. I'm like, hoping to lose respect for me, So, and Bella Isabella's always been so nice to me whenever I saw her, always so kind and friendly. And so I was with them at this event this past weekend, and I found a chance to say, thank you and talk a little bit. And it was revealed to me that actually, yeah, it was okay. I was actually funny or humorous in that state. And again, this could be a lie to help, assuage my feelings. I don't know. It's a very kind thing. It's kind of like Heart of Darkness. I mentioned this in my discussion about Bill last week, that in Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, Kurtz, the protagonist, toward the end of the novel, is bitten by a mosquito and gets malaria. And he starts to froth the mouth. He starts to lose control of his mind. He gets angry and violent, starts ursing profanity. He just loses his humanity in the heart of this jungle, having attempted to bring some kind of civility to it. And toward the end of the very end of the story, his body's brought back to England where his wife is, and his wife asks the person, "What did he say? In his last moments, how was he? What did he say?" And rather than reveal the truth, the horror of what's happening about going mad and just losing his humanity, the person told the wife, he said he loved you. Necessary lie. So I have a feeling this might be a necessary lie that's being fed to me, and I appreciate it because I like being a happy person in that state. So yeah, yeah. So Alan at Mr. Lewis says picture didn't happen. Yeah, that got me in trouble last time. I'm not doing that again. All right. So tonight we have with us two amazing individuals, Frank Cinelli and Isabella Clayton. They met by walking to the same gin joint after Phenom 104, which I think Ellen might have been at that one. They've been exploring the AbbeyNormal and paranormal together ever since. They've been helping people with spiritual cleansings, which we can talk about tonight a little bit, in terms of showing teams how to check for ticks and so much more. Frank is make sure you get this right, bioenergetic practitioner. Bioenergetic. Note to self, become that. It sounds cool. A paranormal investigator, a writer, and a speaker. Isabella is a psychic medium. I am now at large, but I'm working on that. I promise I will address that issue. An artist, an investigator as well. Together, they've explored so many places in our country, around the globe, looking for cryptids, like my Uncle Sal, for example. He's a cryptid, I think. I'll talk to him later on. Living at the paranormal, helping those who have passed on, all the while searching for some fun and new adventure. So please, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome my guests for this evening, Frank and Bella. Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hi.
We're here. That was like quite the intro, and I wish I was taking notes because first of all,
I did take notes. It just says here 1 loaf bread.
1 loaf bread. Got no milk?
I'll add that.
So first of all, taking care of you that night, you were hysterical. Now, you mentioned Bill Freeman, and Bill, you never had to guess where you stood with him. He told you like it was. I respect that. I appreciate that. I'm kind of the same way. Chris, if you were an ass that night, I would let you know you're an ass that night.
Actually,
we would have laughed. I would have teased the daylights. I'd still be teasing the daylights out of you. I can't think of anything I could remotely bust your chops for on that night. You were hysterical. We walked around the Hawthorne. Kept making sure you were drinking water, giving you liquid B12 so you wouldn't feel like death in the morning. So it was. And I told you earlier, I would do that for most anybody. In if an event like that, I would, hey, come on, let's go for a walk. Let me introduce myself. I had known, right? We had known each other,
right?
We were close, but we would talk and change and so on and so forth. And it's like, oh man, because my opinion over the years formed about you that you are just like one great guy. I let me get him the hell out of here before people start taking pictures.
Right. Always the case too. I'm just thankful that they have cell phones when I was in high school or college because
me too.
No political office for me ever at that point. So
no,
I would be so blackmailed.
I'm still borderline if I could run or not.
Still borderline.
A lot of Polaroids.
Yeah, but see, back in the day, though, you sent them away usually, right? And so it would come back to be a thumb. Our person's head cut off. You didn't know. Now you take a picture, you can adjust it, modify it, the saturation, the light color, the hue. You put an effect on that. Off it goes to California in 1 second.
Yeah,
it's amazing the technology that we have. And
it truly is. And I'm wondering. I thought my Polaroid was big tech.
At the time, it was amazing. It was like magic. For some reason, it was blowing up. For somebody, like, you don't have to. We did that anyway. You shook it around, whatever. That was like part of the trick, And then there it was. Right there would appear in front of your eyes like this beautiful mirage you could hold on to. I remember those days.
Yeah, me too.
Me too.
When I first started investigating, I would use Polaroids.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about that. So technology over the past 10, 15, 20 years has changed quite a bit. You have both, for many years, looked into what I call like the mysteries, really, of life. Things on the fringes that people wonder about, you tend to pursue and look at. Have you seen a great deal of change in your practices and in your body of work because of technology, or no?
Yes and no. I mean, I like flashy lights and buzzy noises and all the cool gadgets and stuff. But I started investigating in the 80s, and I had a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and you had your senses and a Polaroid that you were limited because, I was in college and I had a limited budget, so I couldn't afford a lot of film. Yeah. So I didn't snap the picture unless I was sure I was going to get something, which very rarely ever did. And I find myself kind of going back to those same basics. I have trunks of gear. We fill the whole car up. I have gear. My gear has gear. My gear needs transport. And I'll lug everything into location, and we'll use like 2 things. Yeah,
that's funny.
For me, it's a kinder, gentler. So in the 70s, I was with my psychic medium stuff, right?
In the 70s?
Yes.
You were alive in the 70s?
Yeah.
Wow.
So in the 70s, I was called evil. Oh, yeah. In the 80s, I was called sensitive. And then it was psychic, now psychic medium. So the labels keep changing, but it's a kinder, gentler world. Yes. And understanding and accepting. And it's not like this complete freak out that I'm not accepted as I am now versus then. I think that's what's changed for me.
It was the occult back then, right? Period. The occult. If you're doing that,
satanic panic.
Right. There's something wrong, and you're making a poor choice. You might lose your relationship, your family, your job, right? Because we didn't
talk about it.
Right. It was, and over time that's changed. And here's a little note from Chad saying, 2 of my favorite investigators. Hi, Frank and Isabel. So
what's up, Chad?
Hello,
miss you, buddy.
One of the things that you were mentioning was the idea that, limited budget. Not all of us run around with a $3 million war chest to go and explore the globe. It's
right.
Especially when you're younger, you have to kind of count your pennies and dimes and put things back sometimes to the counter. Put that back. When I was in college during the haunting I was in with Jeff Unger, Jeff had a Minolta 35 millimeter camera, and like you had, he had the a cassette recorder with like a Maxell tape in it, and Jeff only had I think 8 exposures left on the negatives on the film, so he'd be very careful, and so we had to pick and choose the moments when to take the photograph. Yeah. So in one way it was helpful because we didn't just waste time. We tried to see the perfect moment and then the perfect situation, then and boom, go. And one way it's frustrating because you might do that and all of a sudden when you're done, there's the picture you want. So it was challenging, but I still think all in all, having to have some qualifications, some limits to what we could do helped us because it made us serious in our approach. It wasn't just wasting time. And so I don't know if that would have happened now if we'd gone through all these things. But Jeff, as I said, and like you were mentioning too, you don't always get images on your developed film. And so when Jeff got the rollback, he's like, nothing. And then he saw the photograph with the skeleton in it. It's a revelatory thing for I think most of us, because even when we know we see and hear something, to have something that looks tangible, it feels good because it goes beyond what you believe or what you sense, as important as it is, because people around you want to know what they, what you're seeing or experiencing. So if I can take you back first to you, Bella, at what point in time did you realize or understand that you might have some kind of gift?
I think 12, because I woke up in the middle of the night and there was a chair in my room, and this Indian, an Indian from India, was sitting in my chair. And back in those days, you weren't exposed to culture. Right. I didn't know what an Indian was. He was actually a Sikh Indian because he's wearing the turban. He had the sari. It was like a complete outfit, and he actually wasn't wearing pants. He was wearing, I don't know what it's called, but it was a wraparound kind of outfit on the bottom. And I looked at him and I felt comfortable. So I just went back to sleep. So I'm like, okay. And I went back to sleep. But that was the first time I really saw a full-bodied, solid apparition in my room.
Pretty clearly, too. I mean, the detail you have is pretty cogent. People sometimes say, well, I think I see a shadow in the corner, or I might have seen a sparkle by the closet, but you actually at a young age saw what looked to be a human form and can describe the detail of it, what he was wearing.
He was completely Indian from India, and I never even knew that culture was there back then.
Yeah.
I mean, we weren't exposed to culture. Happy Days was on TV. It's like it wasn't. It wasn't. I didn't even know. It wasn't until years later that I even understood what I saw. But I think around 12, and my mom used to say I would tell her, like, when we would pass. I lived in Arizona until a little bit ago. I passed a mountain, told her how I was a white Indian. I killed someone up there. So I mean, I have experiences, but that's the first time I think I saw a full-bodied apparition.
Well, that's pretty, and there are some people who will spend a lot of time and money and effort hoping to see that one time. And here you are in your bed, like, yep, there it is.
Good night. So one thing with Isabella, right? So she's a very talented artist, but that's not her day job.
No.
Okay, but because of that artist eye, she can remember and hone in on the detail.
Right.
It's like, well, I see something. I think it might have had a face. It went that way.
Right. I think that's amazing, and I also am impressed by the fact too that you didn't run and hide. Something about you sensed, understood. It wasn't an immediate threat, which not everyone has that capability. You did, and just one more thing to follow up on that springboard for that. Did you tell your friends, relatives, or did you kind of keep it to yourself for a while?
I kept everything to myself. I wasn't discouraged, but I wasn't encouraged by my family. They all knew I had abilities. They would ask me questions sometimes, find missing things, stuff like that. So it wasn't as a big deal in my family that I saw things. So I didn't tell them.
Well, I love that. You're like the functional psychic. Where are my car keys? What's the animal really thinking? That kind of thing.
I still have friends call me up.
Tell them the phone story.
Which one? Oh, so when I was little, I would pick up this play telephone and tell my mom. I would be talking to someone and saying this person's coming over. My mom would immediately clean up the house, and it had to be like 5 years old, 4 years old, or something like that. And she would immediately clean up the house because she knew that person was coming over. One time I told her my Aunt Mimi wasn't coming over because she had an accident and she was in a car accident. So she would always clean up the house as soon as I got on the phone.
So a couple years ago, I bought her one of those phones. She refuses to answer it.
Well, it's a lot of pressure.
I don't want to hear. Sometimes I like to have it turned off a little bit, but yeah.
Well, I understand. My father was a science teacher, and people who watch the show know this: biology, chemistry, physics, and so Immanuel Kant, empiricism. You got to feel it, see it, touch it. Other things, esoteric things. Well, you can think about that, but don't invest yourself in those things because it's this movie strip goes around and around with no answers. But later on in life, my mom told me something like you said. That I said, "Oh, Dad fell down. He got hurt. He's not at work. He fell down, and ripped his pants." And it's like, "Oh, stop!" And then he came home. He ripped his pants. So little kids sometimes know things. My parents, like you, never encouraged me to share those things too much. In fact, they almost said, "Just keep it to yourself if you can. People understand."
They just
it wasn't.
Yeah.
But it wasn't as though it was a bad thing. It's just, and once in a while, like you see someone's aura. So, we were both lucky, I guess, Bella, you and I, that we had parents around, that the parents would actually speak to us about these things. And that we were raised in a place we could say a few things, and not be cast out.
So I found out later that my mom could see like I do. Okay. And I didn't know this because she kept it to herself. I wasn't into my late 20s until I found out she could see. I was so mad at her. And I'm like, "Why didn't you tell me?" She goes, "I don't want to. I don't want anything to do with this." So she refused to talk about it, or she just tried to shut it down because it was scary to her. So when she goes, "You scared me half to death all the time." All the time.
Interesting. I think regardless if it's a paranormal or artist skills or whatever you talk about, how many times is like a baseball player, their son wanted to be with the dad, but there's no Willie Mays Jr., Mickey Mantle Jr. It's hard sometimes to live someone else's dream. It's hard sometimes to walk into someone else's footsteps, even if you're trying to honor them, because it might not be your path. And being the ghost boy, I had 2 children and I didn't know what to do. I had no idea what to do. I was blindsided by this. People looked for it. I didn't. It just found me in force, So did I tell my kids what happened and predispose them to what happened to them? Do I say nothing? I have to be ignorant of the moment and hope they survive it? And so what I did was I told them bedtime stories, fairy tales. Everything that happened to me, but was never me. It was a king or a queen or a frog or a deer or a dragon. I always made it, my whole haunting, but with different animals and characters, they could problem solve on their own and know the right things to do without
That's
feeling
great.
beholden to be the ghost boy's child. And it wasn't until sci-fi when they actually found out, like, Dad, all those stories it was important to me. They had their identity. It was so important to me that they could make their own choices, because oftentimes that's not the case. And Chad says, he says, I got a chance to work with these two on a ghost hunt, Sasquatch UFO hunt, and they were extremely professional and brought a lot of energy to the team.
That was an amazing night.
I'd love to do that again.
Yeah, that was. We were there 10 minutes, and rocks started dropping out of the air into the pond.
Jeez.
True story.
Where are the rocks coming from?
Bigfoot.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We saw what we thought was maybe a UFO. We had experiences in the cemetery that was up there.
I forgot that. Yeah.
It was a complete, like, anything that could happen happened that night.
Right. And the next following day.
Yeah. It was amazing.
You ever see the movie Predator, where it kind of just shimmers in the thing?
Yeah, there's the things like this.
Right. Yeah. Before you see that, all you see is the shimmer.
Yes.
We kept seeing that
in the trees.
Quick story. We have an area around here. It's called Columcille. It's on a major ley line. It's very kind of spiritual, elemental, fairy kind of thing. The ley line goes to Iona, Scotland. In that area, I have seen those same shimmers.
Right.
And when Bella was in Arizona, we were talking on the phone. I'm just driving around because what else am I going to do? Right.
We were talking on the phone and he's driving around.
Yeah. All of a sudden, I hear this big thud on the top of my truck.
I heard it.
She heard it on the phone.
I thought he hit something.
I thought maybe snow fell from a tree and hit it. So around the corner, and the sunlight's coming into my windshield now, and there is this massive freaking handprint on my windshield.
You took a picture of it. It was scary.
I wish I knew. I know where all my Polaroids are, but my digital photos, they're everywhere.
On old hard drives from 1998. Who knows?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So we now know a little bit of Bella's background. How did Frank Cinelli get involved in this area?
So growing up, I guess I would see things like I had an invisible friend, right? Well, not invisible. I saw him. He was gray and he had blonde hair. And his name was McTavish. Okay. Now, bear in mind, I grew up in a community that was 99% Italian.
Okay.
I never heard the name McTavish before. I mean,
Irish.
Where would you get that? Yeah. I don't know. If your name didn't end in a vowel, I couldn't pronounce it. Apparently, I can't pronounce your name. I've been calling you Cesare for years.
I find the most things.
It's and I get it, right? My name is, we go by Cinelli, but correct pronunciation is Cinelli.
No, yes.
Yeah. So I understand the Cesare. But anyway, so I had, and I would talk about him. And my parents said, "Oh, yeah, an imaginary friend. You have a good imagination," and so on and so forth. And then McTavish started telling me to do things, and I would get in trouble for those things. But Mom, McTavish said it was going to be okay. So that was kind of weird. Then growing up, I was the youngest of 5, right? And again, in the 70s, the Ouija board was a big thing, and so on and so forth. My sister had like this big party, and we went into the downstairs bathroom at my parents' house, and we did a Ouija board, and they tried to summon this local doctor who had just passed away. Wow. Okay? I never met the man. I saw his face in the mirror. I was able to describe it right down to his little wireframe glasses.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've always had this fascination. I go to the library, and they had like 2 books on, paranormal.
Yes.
And, one of them, half the pages were gone.
Always.
Yeah. So, but I would watch like In Search of and try to learn all I could. Right. Another time using a Ouija board. Right now I'm in high school now, and my buddies and I were doing the thing. and we're like, okay, who is this? And it spelled out Keith Moon. I was like, I don't know if it was Keith Moon, but it was, high school me was like, oh my God, yes.
Best thing ever, yes. If you're going to summon somebody, he's with you, yes.
Yeah. So then we asked, okay, what's our friend Dave doing right now?
Right.
And it goes, in the shower. So it's all right. We end the session. We called Dave. Dave, what are you doing? He said, well, I just got out of the shower. It's like, there's too many coincidences. And I always call myself a skeptical believer. I mean, I believe, right? But I have a background in science. I have a PhD in biotechnology. I was raised by my father was a doctor. Prior to being a doctor, he was an engineer.
Wow.
So, there's a lot of logic.
Yes.
But all these things defied logic, and it just kept adding up.
It defies logic, and also they're experiential. It's not as though they're conceptual. And poor Dave, is Dave in the shower.
Yeah.
I always feel like somebody's watching me.
Right?
No privacy. Oh. It's like, geez, if you're in the bathroom next time, tune out, please. Exactly.
Right. Exactly. It's ghost watch you poop. I'm just saying.
I don't know. What?
Ghost watch you poop.
Do you think they do that because it's fun, or because there's a code someplace in the ghost handbook, or because they just happen to be where gases roam?
Yes, all of the above.
All of the above. All the above.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we talk about in different fields of study the concept of nature versus nurture. How much of things are DNA inherited through the biological parents? How much is environmental, that exposure to a concept or an activity develops that gift? I think, Bella, you mentioned that your mom had some of these same or similar abilities, but didn't share that with you, to kind of keep you safe. And do you think that the gifts that you have, your abilities, are passed down genetically, or do you think it's more a product of the environment that you're raised in?
No, all my nieces see. And my mom and my brother, my sister's an empath now. I think it's hereditary. And I've noticed when I'm working with people, almost all of them is hereditary. I've never really seen where, I guess maybe once or twice, where nature has changed the person. I guess it does happen, but I've almost seen this gift absolutely hereditary.
Interesting.
I agree.
Almost like a gene. You'd agree?
I agree. So years later, I found out that my father, who always told me, no, this is imagination, is a freaking empath.
Yeah.
Right? My grandmother, again, years after she died, I found out, well, she would see things and feel things. And people would go to her to, remove malocho. And
yes.
Yeah. So, but we didn't talk about this stuff.
Yeah,
Right.
No one talked about it. But yeah, no, I think it's hereditary.
That's fascinating to me. Many of the people, the majority of people that I speak to on this program, who either will claim to or demonstrate psychic gifts or mediumship, tend to say, almost all of them, that there tends to be a strong component of the genetic background of family histories, not often shared, but just going down the line. And I didn't find out until I was in my probably 30s, well after my experience, that my paternal grandmother was a snake charmer and fortune teller, crystal ball, everything in the circus back in the 40s.
Wow.
And that her mother brought these big wooden tarot cards from Italy and had eyes of newt in her drawer. And people came from Chicago and Philadelphia to have their fortunes read, but that was never shared. It was kind of like the gypsy part.
I wish it was.
It was. I wish it was, but it seemed there was more of a desire back then to kind of fit in, to not be singled out, to not to become part of a fabric of society. People are more, I think, tend to be more individually focused nowadays, more about here's what I feel, what I want. And there are pros and cons to both those approaches, but it's a shame sometimes in the act of protecting, we're shielded from things that might be able to help us. Mm-hmm. And I think that, as parents, as friends, as now that we're all past 30, right, we begin to realize there's probably some kind of necessary balance between saying nothing and saying too much, and find that middle ground where how do you share and how do you apply what you share, right? In other words, how do you make the moments you have, actualize to the greatest degree? And I think, Frank, you mentioned when we were talking at Selma, we were talking a little about sharing ideas. And and in your presentation, you're going to say a few things about, right, things you had learned. Do you mind sharing a thing or two about what you're going to share at that event?
I mean, like I told you, communication is key, right? And we were doing an event at Penhurst, right?
Right.
And I got scratched across the neck. Now, this is all being filmed, and I didn't want to draw attention to myself. So I go over to Bella. I said, Bella, check my neck. And she's like, oh, there's a scratch there. Well, next thing, you know Bob Christopher?
Very well.
Yeah. So Bob's got the camera, and he's like right there on my freaking neck. Like, come on. So now I'm like kind of a little wound up, and I didn't want to bring out my, my inner Italian and start, how dare you? Da, 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 da.
Zupa the Pesh.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I went down another path, but I'm back now. So Rich Roselle kind of grabs me and says, Frank, you got to remember where you are. Okay. A lot of these people were nonverbal.
Right.
And touch was their only method of communication. And, they might have been trying to touch you. And then all of a sudden they got enough energy and they touched you to get your attention because that's what you were asking for. I'm like, Rich, because I wanted to be angry.
That makes too much sense, Rich. Get away.
So it's methods of communication, learning how to communicate. When Bella and I first got together, she was still living in Arizona. So all we had was communication, and we learned how to talk to each other. Okay. We even set up ground rules of arguing because, people argue. You can't be with someone a long time and not get in an argument.
No, not functionally. No.
Yeah, no. So we developed this system. Okay, here's how we're going to argue. Okay, we're going to talk it out. Okay, because her major response was withdrawal. And that just triggers me. My major response was explode because,
and that
Italian.
Triggers me.
And that triggered her. So we've learned to kind of reel that in. So, okay, let's talk about this. And we could each only come back to it one time.
Got it.
So weeks later, a year later, she can't keep throwing this in my face how bad I screwed up.
I've been married now for 33 and a half years, and we also have ground rules too, and the main thing is I always tell my wife I'll give her what she wants and I give it to her. That's how we function very well, and I think that's
one of the things though that it's lent value to is in the paranormal field when we go on investigations, right? We talk about it. Okay, this is what I'm experiencing, and he will want to protect me and get me out of the situation, but I don't want to be out of the situation, right? So we've talked about what does that look like for both of us? What does protection mean for both of us? What is getting me out of a situation versus letting me have the experience, right? So also with my mediumship, and he's doing his paranormal investigation, what do you want from me? Because I'm not going to go in and just say, oh, there are 5 ghosts here and they're, doing this and this and this, because that's not fair to him in his investigation, right? So we've laid ground rules and we communicate and we talk about what those what it looks like.
So what I look for from her is suggestions. Like, hey, why don't we set a REM pod up over there? Okay. Energy feels a little crackly to me. Let's see what we get. And that's great. She won't say, oh, there's a little girl named Sally over there and she's sucking your thumb. And
it taints the evidence, taints the person.
It directs the witness.
And that's all they're thinking about. So communications is a key, even in your investigations.
Yeah. And how you communicate too. Okay. So we both know Chuck Sanders, right?
Yeah, very well.
I'll see Chuck and I'll just, oh, you dirty old SOB, rah, 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 and we'll just come in and hug it out. Right. When I run into Brooke, I would never do that.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's probably smart just in case.
She can.
Well, she scares me.
She can.
She scares you.
Love you, Brooke.
She's amazing. Yes.
Yes, she is. But it's learning how to communicate. So when you're investigating a place repetitive times, okay, and you start asking questions about Civil War, and maybe they don't want to talk about Civil War. Let's talk about your farm, okay? And now all of a sudden you're getting responses. So it's the method, it's how you communicate.
It's interesting too, because it almost sounds like, oh, here we go. You ding, ding, ding. I'm from Brooklyn. I'd probably smack you alongside the head.
She would. That's why we love her.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And hi, Ajeng. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate your viewership, member of the BB3 family. It sounds to me you're also implying, though, Frank, not only is it communication, but also understanding lens. In other words, understanding in that process how the other person might view things or see things, so that you take into account their perspective as well. So, and right now you have the baseball pennant fever is happening now, where all the teams are going for the last playoff spots, and the Pirates, I think, are playing the Yankees. So if the Yankees win tonight, let's say it's 4-3, the Yankee fan says it's a good game. The Pirates fans see the same game. Same thing happens. Where their team loses, it's a bad game. So two people, based on their lens, can see the same exact event in front of them.
Yeah,
clearly, and have a different impression of what that meant to them and to their worldview. So I think that when anybody out there in the field should try to think of that during ghost hunts, during lectures, during communications. What is that person looking for? How do they see things? And how can I best assist them? Because to just talk at somebody, right, is the same as anything as talking with somebody.
Right.
I'm sorry, did you say something?
I did not.
Okay, good.
And Glenda says that very true. I find listening brings out what the message may be. And I think
and interpreting the message, though, it's not using your filter, but their filter. Because when you use your filter, it could be wrong, right? You're going down the wrong path. It's just like when I see on TV 3 scratches, right? Well, 3 scratches doesn't mean it's a demon. There's so many reasons that scratches could occur, right? So many issues. And so it's not looking at things with your filter, but their filter, like Rich told you, right?
Yes. That's exactly where I was going to go with that, Bella. That's exactly where we sometimes, as living corporal beings, don't understand plain words or sentences. We sometimes misunderstand simple gestures or phrases when we have the constant contact. When you then add in the idea of beyond the veil, where you can't quite hear as good or see as good or communicate as often, it becomes even more challenging. And I think that also probably then lends itself to the concept of listening carefully. And as you were saying, not trying to make the facts fit your theory, but seeing where the facts lead you. Right. Correct? And if I can ask both of you individually, this time we'll do Frank first and then Bella second. Can you please share with us one of the most amazing things that you've experienced in your decades of the pursuit of the unknown?
Wow. It's so hard to narrow it down. I've had so many amazing. So I was at Iron Island, right? And the first time I ever got touched, are you familiar with Iron Island?
I am.
Okay. So in the chapel room, there's 4 of us, we're all kind of laying face to face doing EVPs, and something grabbed my butt. I never realized I could jump that high. Right? Have you ever been,
Yes, I have.
By a ghost.
Yes.
I didn't even get it out. I'm like, stupid question.
Yes.
Yeah. But you get cold from the inside out.
Yep. Yes.
And it's like you can't warm up. And there's a wonderful person who works at Iron Island, Lorraine. Love her. She went into mom mode and started taking care of me. And we've been friends for years now because of that. We would go to events and, tell people we have 5 children, but not together.
Funny.
That was our running joke for a long time. There was that. There was.
You've been investigating for a long time.
I
so
know
I don't know.
you've heard me tell these stories.
That's pretty amazing. Some people don't have contact like you had, and I think it's kind of funny, Frank. I don't know if you know this. Maybe you do. Bill Freeman, for the last 6 years, would always have somebody run up and grab my ass. If I was in Maine, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, that was his thing. Like, this is from Bill. So it's kind of funny you mentioned that as one of your, it probably was Bill.
It was probably Bill. I blame Bill.
Mhm.
Yeah. Selma Mansion, we had some great stuff, and I was telling you while we were there. So we were filming with Ghost Detectives,
Yes.
right? And there's this little closet by the upstairs bathroom, which is creepy as all get out.
Spiders.
Well, no. So we go and we're sitting in the back of the closet, and the cameraman's in the front of the closet, and we're just kind of sitting there, waiting, looking, listening, and then all of a sudden, the stool the cameraman was sitting on gets pulled out from under him, and he makes this amazing one-handed catch on the camera. Right?
I love that.
So later we're down in the basement, right? He's filming me again. He gets hit in the back of the head with a little stone. All the equipment starts going off. He's like, "Gosh dang it, Frank! I'm not filming for you anymore."
He's at it.
He's at it.
It's done.
Andrew. Yeah.
Those are good anecdotes because
Penhurst
moments, but they're funny too.
Yeah. So here's a good one at Penhurst. So we were there. It was a Dave Schrader event, right? And I was there with Aaron Sagers.
Yep.
So we're down. I think it was cell block number 4.
Not Penhurst, it'd be
Eastern State. I'm sorry, Eastern State.
Century.
Yeah. So we're down cell block number 4, and we're looking in, and they have the little skylight there. The light comes in, and I can see something going in front of the light, and behind the light, and in front of the light, and behind the light. I'm like, Aaron, come here. Look at this. He's looking. He's like, yeah, I see something. So then he calls it out. He jumped till he hit the back wall. It was amazing. Because the door, all of a sudden, all the light was gone.
Right.
You could not see. It was the blackest black I've ever seen in my life.
Mm.
Yeah. So I could go on. We could fill another 2 hours with paranormal stories.
We could, although I'd like to hear what Bella has to say about what might be her most amazing moment.
When she met me.
Note to self, use that line.
I know.
Okay, you're saying?
Yes. He tricked me.
He tricked me.
I don't know if I have one versus another. I really couldn't tell you. I've been seeing human entities, non-human entities for such a long time that it's just part of my daily experience. So for me, I wouldn't say anything stands out. I mean, I've seen some pretty, one of the things that I think everyone needs to know is that there's negative, neutral, and positive entities, right? And I think the one time I saw a negative entity, and it's a big, long story, I think that was if people could have felt that, they would know what a demonic haunting was. And half the stuff you see on TV is not demonic. There's no way. Not with what I have experienced. I think that was the one thing that really sticks out in my mind.
That's interesting. If somebody goes through a situation, anything, whether it's addiction, loss of a job, health issues, depression, gambling, death, there's so many things that can impact us, right? And those things teach us about ourselves, about choices, lessons learned in things. Mm-hmm. When you go through something, it gives you a knowing, an understanding of what rings true and not ring true. And so, like yourself, I think I very rarely watch any paranormal TV, but sometimes I think to myself, that would never happen in that way. Not to be judgmental, it's just that doesn't make any sense. Somebody who didn't have it happen wrote that particular script or that episode, and that's unfortunate when that happens, because the people who are there are your best evidence. I mean, even forget the photographs, even forget the notes, the person's testimony, their emotions, how they share that moment is really how it lives on the best, I think, right? Because it puts you in that moment. And Barry has a question for you. Iron Island, Buffalo, New York?
Yes.
Amazing place, not too far from Fort Niagara.
It's called the Lovejoy section. It's surrounded by train tracks, which is why it's called Iron Island.
Got it. So only iron, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, this is hard for me to read. Lots of words here.
That's a lot of words.
First time I've ever used a spirit box with Frank and Isabel, and I became a huge believer in it after being a skeptic. We got our names, the UFOs I saw, 2 people talking back and forth, the shadow figures I saw, and mentions of the witch that lived there. It was great to see them use the equipment, and I learned a lot about how it worked. So, question for you based upon the statement of Chad. How much do you rely on the equipment, or don't you?
So I like equipment. There's and it's a phone app, and don't come after me for that, but it's called EchoVox.
Oh yeah, I know. Yes.
I have gotten more things through the EchoVox. We were doing an event in New Hampshire. What was the place? All right, so it was this.
There's just so many. I don't know.
It's
this bed and breakfast up in New Hampshire, and we're there. And we're doing EchoVox. Johnny Zappis was there. Fitzwilliams.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm working the event. Zappis is there. My full name, gets called out on the EchoVox 3 times.
Wow. And it can't do that. It's not. It doesn't have that
kind of program for that, right?
Yeah. So it's the end of the night. I'm ready to go up to this little apartment they're storing us at, and ready to have a beer and start laughing. Somebody comes running up. Frank, you got to come up to the attic. There's someone calling your name on the EchoVox.
Great.
So I go trudging up to the attic, and I'm like, okay, what's going on? Who is this? And I hear Annette. Okay. Well, I know a couple of Annettes. Annette, what's your last name? Says her last name. I'm not going to say it because
right.
So Annette was a patient of mine who had passed away.
Wow.
She and I would get into these great paranormal discussions. Her grandfather worked at Area 51. Yeah.
Wow.
So I asked the EchoVox, I said, Annette, where'd your grandfather work? 51.
There you go.
I'm like, blown away.
That's not coincidence.
No.
No.
And again, the EchoVox has what I used it in Europe, and I had French coming through. Okay. Now, there is no French in the database.
We used it with the gypsies at Penhurst, and the gypsies actually heard their language being talked.
Yeah. Not Penhurst, it's Rolling Hills.
Oh, Rolling Hills. That's right.
Yeah.
See, I'm not good with names.
They all run together.
I'm not good with names. I will mix names up all the time.
So that I like. I like the static dome from Vortex Ghost Gear, Bob Christopher.
Right.
I'm plugging him. Also, I love we have this the trigger prop cat.
Oh yeah, from him.
Yeah. So
that actually gets a lot of attention. It's amazing how much attention it gets because it just looks like a cat and stuff.
Which is nice. Most people like their pets or animals, and if you've been in a building for 216 years, wandering around, you see a little animal, then that's pretty cool, right? It might draw your attention. And why do you think that people have this great reverence for Ouija boards, but really thumb their noses at phone apps? Aren't they pretty much the same thing?
It's the same thing, and vice versa. I posted a picture. My son picked up this vintage Ouija board, right? Yes. So I posted a picture of the Ouija board on the Ouija board table. Some of the art things that Bella does, our kitchen table is a Ouija board, right?
Wow. So, it looks like the original. It looks exactly like it.
So I posted playing Ouija on a Ouija,
right?
And people were very well. You're opening a door, or you're summoning demons. You're encouraging other people to do this. I'm like, this is no different from any other paranormal gear. It's all about intention and protection. Right. Same thing. If you're doing EVPs, it's about your intention and how you protect yourself.
Yep. Yeah, and
we've always said that.
And words are interchangeable between a spirit light, a Christ light, a zone of protection. People have different uses or terminology for the same thing of trying to surround yourself with positivity, protect yourself, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think that's kind of cool that some of these practices that many of us use can be applied across universal languages, and it doesn't really matter what you speak or how you phrase it. You're talking about the intent again. I think the intent is a very strong thing. And even when I teach my students at school, I write the phrase on the board, yes, you're smart, which is an encouraging phrase. And they go, that's really nice. So I can say it one of two ways. Yes, you're smart. Thank you. Or yes, you're smart. Like, ooh, now it's an insult. You're saying I'm not smart. Exactly. So it's interesting how, the language is always secondary to intent, to tone. Mm-hmm. It's a fascinating thing. And it seems to me that many spirits, ghosts, whatever you want to call them, right? Lost souls, they tend to pick up on intent more than people might realize.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
They're humans. I mean, as long as that's who you're talking to is a human, but anything could be a Ouija board. Anything.
So your intent creates energy. Right?
Yes.
Like energy is going to be attracted. So if your intent is good, most of the time, not all the time, nothing is 100%. Most of the time, you're going to attract good energy.
Wow.
I had a friend, not a friend, but I got a call when I was in Arizona at a retirement community. This elderly couple was having problems seeing things in their house. I'm like, okay. So I went over there and I'm saying, what did you just invite in? I go, what? And then what happened was their friend, which was very close to, died. They said, please come back and talk to us. Please visit us, please. And they kept saying these things over and over. So they opened up a portal, or however, whatever you want to call it. And entities were coming through. It's the exact same thing. It's your intent. It's what the energy you put into it. You can make anything manifest.
I have a patient that same thing happened to. So I have a patient, his wife died. He's very distraught. And he tried to contact her.
Right.
Okay. But then all hell broke loose in his apartment and bottles were being thrown at him. I have one of those bottles that's, surrounded by salt and blasted and locked in a little glass case. But it was his intent. He was so desperate to make contact that desperation
Created an opening.
Yeah.
So you can create openings. It doesn't matter. You don't need a Ouija board. You can do anything.
I was a teenager. It was January 30th, 1985. And Lorraine Warren told us, like attracts like. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand what that meant because I thought the like poles of a magnet repel. But she wasn't talking about science. She was talking about spirituality and energy in a different way. And I went from being horribly skeptical of the concept, like, oh, come on, to not long after saying, wow, was she ever right? And it's interesting because I think that most of us take ourselves seriously to a degree. We try to learn, we try to present ourselves in intelligent ways, right, and be useful to the community. But I think we all sometimes make an error. I think we all sometimes have to, recheck, recharge, and I think that's part of the human experience. No?
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would agree.
I feel a bit sad saying this, but apparently the hour went by. And I don't understand how it's possible. It seemed like 26 minutes.
Wow.
It's 10 o'clock. And
I barely got a word in edgewise.
Oh, my gosh.
That's my fault. But before we go, anything you'd like to say to my viewers, to the audience, the folks out there? Anything you want to share?
Thank you for listening to us.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Oh, and the ticks that we check for, it's paranormal ticks. I forgot to write the word paranormal.
As opposed to, right, got one.
Not regular ticks, which can be just as fun if you're doing it right.
Paranormal ticks when we're done with investigation, even on the house. I'm like, okay, check me for ticks, because sometimes you get a little attachments, screen scratching kind of thing. So it's paranormal ticks. I've
heard of 4 more years, but they're now chanting one more hour. And but I really appreciate you folks coming in. And Ms. Ross says you always have great guests in your show. Thank you. And tonight, no exception. Thank you for an awesome show, Chris, Frank, and Bella. I appreciate all the feedback, folks. I really do. Thank you for being here. I love you very much. I want to thank profoundly Frank and Bella for being my guests tonight. I respect them. I admire them. I'm proud to be their friend. I sometimes, like many of you out there, don't always put myself out there and say hello a lot and socialize. They wind me up. I speak, I go back in the box, and the next show happens. That's pretty much how I live my life, and that's probably a bad thing. And I've been trying myself to recently just talk a little more on the sidelines and learn who people are, and it's really been a valuable experience. I'm sure the folks tonight listening to both of you had a great time too. So Thank you both for being here. I really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, like I always tell you, if it's true and it helps, please say it. On that note, please be safe. Love you all. And until next time, love the people around you. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
This has been turn to gold on BB3 TV.